What is up, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us at our third partner pitch event. We are so excited. We have some great companies that are going to be pitching today. But first, I wanted to make a couple of announcements. We are super stoked for our RedwoodJS conference in September. That's going to be in Grants Pass, Oregon. We're going to have a fantastic time. We have some great speakers lined up, so be sure to check that out at redwoodjsconf.com. And along with that, we also have our build competition. So go to build.redwoodjs.com. You have 4 weeks to build. We'll have 3 finalists and over 10K in prizes. It's also a great way to get free tickets to the conference, and that also includes travel and lodging. So we hope to see you there. I'm going to pull our panelists up. We have David and Ellen joining us, and Peter. Welcome.
Oh boy.
Hello.
Oh boy. We brought the heat today. We saw the pitches. So we brought an all-star round of panelists here to make sure that we even the playing field a little bit.
And I'm sure you'll have some great commentary. We're so excited to have you guys here. So first up, let's go ahead and pull up Michael. Oh, there you are, Michael. Welcome. And Michael is from Apollo. So with Michael, without further ado, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. There we go. All right. So hi, everyone. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. My name is Michael Watson. I lead developer relations at Apollo. And I'm really excited to talk with you about GraphOS, which is our SaaS offering, but also what I think it'd be really relevant and helpful for the RedwoodJS community. Just real quick, one of the best ways if you want to get in touch with me or anything after this, we have our Discord community. You can feel free to ping me anytime at Watson. So let's talk maybe about the Apollo that you're familiar with. Apollo Client. It's one of our open source projects that's really been around for, 6+ years. It's the default in new RedwoodJS applications. We always have implemented the latest from React. We just put suspense integration into 3.8, local state management options, great cache with zero config. And the best thing, I think, it's proven at scale and has a very vibrant ecosystem. There's a great community around Apollo Client. Now, let's talk a little bit about GraphOS, which maybe this is the side of Apollo that you're not as familiar with. GraphOS is really about a management control plane for your GraphQL API and how everyone is consuming and contributing to that. One of the core pieces of that is our Apollo router technology, which is about routing across multiple GraphQL APIs. And we're going to talk about that more in just a second. There's way too many features here for us to just cover in this pitch of what's today. So if you want to check out more, I put the link into our platform docs that gets a little bit more into each one of these features. But I really want to focus on what I think would be helpful for this community today. So let's talk about the typical RedwoodJS app, right? I love the developer experience that's behind it. You have all your services kind of nicely, neatly wrapped up, contributing into this GraphQL API, and you have this mono repo that's part of it. But what I've seen that happens sometimes is as your project gets more successful, maybe you have a mobile team that starts up some mobile projects and they start consuming that same GraphQL endpoint, but maybe they don't want to use some of the same fields that you already have developed in there. And you start getting to this world where you kind of have different representations, one for the mobile, one for the web, and that might cause some friction over time. And as teams grow, the development process might slow down. And I've seen this is where, the mobile teams might start creating their own backends that kind of gives the functionality of what they need, which causes a little bit of duplication. Now, this is kind of the growing point, and I'm setting this up for where the Apollo router might fit into the picture. So I could see a possible future with RedwoodJS applications where they grow to a certain point where the Apollo router and Apollo Federation starts becoming part of the picture, where you really want to have those mobile teams essentially extending off of the RedwoodJS app. That's kind of like the one source of truth. And then they can build, maybe a little GraphQL API that has some flavors of representations that they want that's coming from that RedwoodJS app. But let's be honest about this. You probably don't need the router today. And you probably ask, is GraphOS something I can even use? Yes, it is. And there's some specific features that I want to cover that I think would be really helpful for this community. So what I've done is I took the RedwoodJS blog, just the starter project from the tutorial, hosted on Netlify. And what I have pulled up is just the graphical representation. Graphical is one of the first playground GraphQL tools that was put out a long time ago. It's made a lot of progress. But one of the things we've built on our side is Apollo Explorer. And you don't need a GraphOS account or anything for this. What I have here on the screen is actually our Sandbox Explorer. So this is at our Studio Sandbox URL. And it gives a nice way for you to be able to create operation collections. There's a couple more things, like if you want to copy an operation to a curl to share with someone. You can also have headers. There's scripts you can create. A lot of flexibility in here. So this is just another option that's out there if you wanted to have something a little different from what Graphical is providing you. Now, if you wanted to use this, there's one thing that you're going to need to do in your project. Now, here's that same project that I was talking about. All I've done is add in a CORS configuration that adds in the studio.apollographql.com URL. Once you've added that, everything with Sandbox will start working, and you could just use it just like I had on the screen. Now, if you want to take a step further into this, there's some great features, I think, inside of GraphOS that would be really helpful to the RedwoodJS community. And we're going to actually jump into those right now. So one of the things that I've done is I've just started out a blank project. So when you sign up for GraphOS, this is kind of the getting started experience. What we can do is we can just add in our URL for our Netlify functions. We call whatever we want for the subgraph name. You can call it monolith RedwoodJS. We just have one right here. This is kind of just the stuff we need to do to get through and create our first graph. Now, I've already created all this behind the scenes, so that's kind of all we need to do to get started. And this is what kind of looks like once everything's there. Now, when you do create a new project, it does provision a cloud router for you. I'd like you to think about it more as a developmental tool, not something that you're going to put into your infrastructure of your production at this point, right? You kind of already have all that set up. But that experience of being able to, for example, create an operation collection that has shared aspects, executing from inside of here, all our options. And I think one of the really cool things that would be an upgrade, you can actually create pre-flight scripts inside of Apollo Explorer. And one of the things that I think would be really helpful is the OAuth. So, there is a whole authentication story that's right through that tutorial. You can actually add in OAuth requests in here. It's something that I've actually done for an app I built with Spotify and their REST API. And it enables developers just to get that access token right away inside of here. Now, there's a lot more stuff that comes along with this, but I think the one feature that I would say is really valuable for RedwoodJS community would be our schema linting feature. So we have this concept of checking, validating schemas, and there's a lot of stuff you can do in that, but I think the linter is one thing that would be really helpful. So in here, there's a lot of different options of what you can configure. Naming conventions, as people contribute into your project, maybe you want to make sure everything's camel case. And if someone doesn't use camel case, you want that to stop the PR. So we can have these errors that pop up inside of here. And integrating this into our app is just setting up a couple GitHub actions. So I have 2 GitHub actions I created. One is this schema check. All it does is it just kind of sets up the project. It runs the Redwood generate command. This is what generates that .graphql file in the .redwood file, .redwood folder, and has all of the information here. So we're basically using this schema in our CI pipelines to check everything. So let's just see how that works. So like, let's say I did something like this. Like that's terrible. Let me put the skip auth in here. And we have just a branch in GitHub. We're just going to commit that, push it up, and then we're going to create a pull request. So pretty straightforward. We're right just in our normal developer workflows. And you'll notice that this linting is what's actually starting off. You can see our Netlify deploy, kind of all of our nice things inside of here. What this is going to do is it's going to take that schema that's being generated in there. It's going to send it into GraphOS, and it's going to compare it to what was initially pushed into there and be able to tell us, is it breaking maybe client operations? Is it breaking some of our linting rules? Lots of things in there. Now, one thing I want to say, we do have, we call it schema validation, where we check this change against the operations that have run in your graph. Those are operations that are sent through the cloud router. Since we're not using the cloud router and what we're talking about right here, there are no operations to check against. But if you wanted to, for example, have a cron job that sends the operations from your client repo to GraphOS through that cloud router on some schedule, it would work inside of there. But look at this. We got that failure inside of here. And we can see that the test name was added and the field name should be camel case. And we can actually just click right into that URL and see that failure real time right inside of here. Right. So that's really what we want to have, is on that pull request where we're adding that in, we want to be able to see that fail happen inside of there. So I think these are a couple of the features in GraphOS that you could use today. It's all free. You wouldn't have to pay anything. Don't need to put the router in front of your infrastructure, and you can start linting your schema and ensuring that all the contributions that are happening in your project all kind of follow the same naming conventions. And of course, if you need any other linting rules, feel free to ping us inside of our Discord channel. We would love to help out with that. Now, just coming back to the end of it, let's recap kind of the things you could do here, use today for free. One, Apollo Sandbox, no GraphOS account in there. We covered the schema linting. Along with that schema linting, there's things like the change log. There's a change log that tells you what are the differences that you've put in there. And I probably should have showed that real quick. That change log just gives you what are the changes that have happened inside of the schema with each one of those. And I have a GitHub action that publishes that schema in here on any change into main. And last, Redwood already talked about their conference. We actually have a GraphQL Summit that's going to be coming up in October. I went ahead and put together a discount code for this community. So if you did want to learn more about GraphOS, GraphQL, Apollo, other GraphQL projects that are coming on, would love to see you there. And if there's anything I can do to help, feel free to ping me and talk to me at any time. With that, I think I'm just about at time. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to speak to the community and kind of show our stuff inside of here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm going to bring our panelists up. And Peter, what do you think? I'll go to you first.
Me? Oh, I think the linter is really
you
cool.
sound a little bit like a robot.
Peter, you got robot voice.
You want me to hop in while Peter fixes robot voice?
Yeah, go for it, Ellen. Thank you.
Always a big fan of linters as someone who is perpetually not getting my syntax correct. One of the things I always think about with having it in CI, are you thinking at all about how to push it earlier in the process so you don't end up with, oh, I was ready to merge and now I have to go back and fix it and change again? How are you thinking through that?
Yeah. I think, one of the things with like the linting process is like you want to get as close to the developer's fingertips of where they can do that. So everything that was in that GitHub action is actually through our Rover CLI. And so it's commands that also developers can run in their workflows. Typically in my projects, I'll create a couple different scripts that will have the ability to run that linting like on the side. I think we always have ESLint, right, involved in all of our projects. This is another addition in that, right? It's not so much about just like the formatting and structure of it. It really gets into the specifics about how are we adding directives into our project. I think of the validation that happens in RedwoodJS for like the directive on skip auth or requires auth. Similar to that, but now you're talking about all the pieces of your GraphQL syntax. So you really want to push that as close as you can to the developer's fingertips so they can do it as soon as possible. I never like making PRs until I know that stuff. Like I hate when a PR gets pushed back to me of like, oh, you know, you have one test failing or you have some linting errors. And it's like, oh, I should have checked that beforehand. So I like having that available before PRs as well.
Peter, we'll see how your robot voice is doing.
This is my normal voice. Okay, perfect.
Turned off the robots.
Yeah, I think the big feature that I loved there was linting. One thing that I wasn't 100% sure about, and I think you might have alluded to it, but maybe I misunderstood you, was that, say for instance, I remove a field of a resolver or I delete something that is actually actively in use. Is there a protection for that?
Yeah, there is. Now, one of the things about that, though, is all the metrics of GraphOS are all collected through that Apollo router. So inside of that project, there is the Explorer, where that's actually sending the traffic through a cloud router, then to your RedwoodJS application. So for you to get that, all you would need to do is somehow send the operations from your RedwoodJS app to the cloud router. I don't think for most of the projects here, it makes sense to put the router, in the middle of your website and, your backend of what's kind of already nicely coupled together. But you could have a cron job that takes all the operations from your GitHub repo, pushes those to the cloud router on, some interval, maybe on a daily basis or every other day. And then those operations would be part of that checks with schema validation. And it would do that static analysis against all those. So definitely an option. You just have to make sure those operations go through the cloud router for that to work.
That's super cool.
Okay, Michael, I've got so much to say. So I'm just going to say it all. It's going to go quick. So look, Meteor, huge influence on me. Meteor, definitely, like Redwood is a spiritual successor to Meteor. Apollo comes out of Meteor project, lays the foundation for really the whole GraphQL ecosystem. Every time in the Redwood community we get to tap into an Apollo tool, it's like we feel like we're hitting the tip of the iceberg. The Apollo client using the cache is one of the favorite tools amongst all the startups I know. GraphOS looks amazing. I know, here's my comment. I know GraphQL has its things and its history, but thank you all for the foundation you've set for this ecosystem and the tooling. Like it's phenomenal. So, and I'm just going to pitch the conference. Gerald from Apollo is going to be coming to the conference and doing a workshop on day 0. If you all want to learn more about Apollo, you should definitely come to that. Michael, thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you so much.
We like you. We like you guys a lot. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Michael, and all that you contribute to the Redwood community.
Definitely. Perfect. Right back at.
Awesome. So next up, I'm going to pull up Cory. Cory is from Massdriver. Welcome, Cory.
There we go.
There we go.
How it goes? Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Well, first off, buckle up because we're going to do a fast 8 minutes. Let me go ahead and share my entire screen. Okie doke. We good to go? Cool. So Massdriver is a visual development environment for managing cloud infrastructure. Our goal is to help engineers spend less time managing the cloud and getting more time to spend developing great features. We take care of monitoring, compliance, provisioning, secrets management, and a lot more. And all of this is done through a directed graph. So you actually draw your infrastructure and it takes care of the provisioning behind the scenes. On the surface, it's a no-code tool, but underneath the hood, this is all real infrastructure as code. So you can actually fine-tune everything about the platform when you're ready, even the UI. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at a Redwood blog that's running and the graph that's running, or sorry, the GraphQL API running behind the scenes. And what I'm going to go ahead and do first, though, is just show you how to integrate Massdriver with your application. So if you have the Massdriver CLI downloaded, you can do Mass bundle new. And the way Massdriver works behind the scenes is it's actually a package manager for infrastructure as code, as well as metadata for your application. So we actually never get access to your source code. Everything you see here, we never touch your source code. So We kind of believe that your source code should be yours and not every company that runs your code. So I'm going to make my blog, and what you'll see here is the first thing it presents us with is different runtimes. And so for this demo, we're going to run this on Kubernetes. We're actually working on adding native support for different frameworks. So if you're interested in getting into our beta for the Redwood native support, send me an email at founders@massdriver.cloud or hit me up on Twitter or any other places, Cory O'Daniel. We're going to go ahead and select Kubernetes deployment. And then the next thing it's going to ask is what my application needs from the cloud. So I said I want it to run on Kubernetes. It's a Redwood blog. I'm going to use Postgres as my backend. And you can see there's this Postgres option I can pick here. So what's really cool is all of these, you see these are prefixed with Massdriver. Not only are we a package manager that you can publish infrastructure and applications into, you can actually define the types that do all of the connectivity between the directed graph. So I'm going to go ahead and name my Postgres connection Postgres. I'll put this folder for CI. So you would drop this into your CI, and this would send all the metadata necessary for us to be able to schedule workloads on Lambdas, Kubernetes, etc. I'm going to go ahead and switch to an actual fine-tuned version of this config for the rest of the demo. So what I want to go ahead and do is show you what is in one of these config files. So you can see here, first off, if we go back to the graph really quick, that's not the graph. You can see that I've got this input coming into my API that says I want it to run on Kubernetes. This actually configures the CI/CD. And what we'll also see here is that I want Postgres. This is what my application needs to store data. And so if we look at this config file lets you fine tune everything about Massdriver. You can really, really change a lot about it. And what you'll see right here up at the top is database URL. What's one thing that's really interesting with Massdriver is you don't have to manage secrets for infrastructure using something like Vault or cobbling together your own thing with LastPass. You can actually do something called dynamic configuration, where you can pull the configuration details out of the directed graph. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm building this Postgres URL based off of the line that's drawn in. If I do a Postgres migration to Postgres 15, I would route in the Postgres 15 database, redeploy, and that would be using that database. You can also do third-party secrets management. If you need your Stripe keys in Massdriver, you can also do that, and we'll take care of storing all those third-party keys. And you can also pluck IAM policies from infrastructure. So the infrastructure themselves are expressing use cases. So maybe you have an SQSQ or a bucket, and they will have fine-tuned principle of least privilege IAM policies that you can pluck off and assign to your application. And Massdriver takes care of all of the IAM and roles for you behind the scenes across all three clouds. So you can see down here is, this is JSON schema. If everyone's kind of seeing this, it's JSON schema in YAML format. You can do it in JSON if you hate the YAMLs like everyone does, but I love YAMLs, so here they are. You can see that I require this Kubernetes cluster. I require Postgres. And you can see I have a couple other types that I've defined down here that allow my application to work with any IAM that gets assigned to me. So this actually makes my application, particularly in Kubernetes, multi-cloud. So let's go ahead and publish this application. I'm just going to go ahead and do mass bundle publish, and you'll see it's going to publish into my package manager. And if I switch back over here, you should see that I probably have an update for my blog API, so I can go ahead and deploy this. The diagram is the source of truth. If we switch back to the application, you can see we've got TLS and DNS. All of the name registration and certificate management and refreshing those certificates is all handled by Massdriver. And what's really cool about the way that this is configured is I can independently configure the scale of my API versus my assets. And so V1 of this, we're doing this as a server serving these assets. We're adding CDN support during our beta. You can come in here and you can fine tune everything about how this is going to run on Kubernetes. So what I want to go ahead and do is show our bundle bar really quick. So this is just a source of a whole bunch of cloud infrastructure that ships with Massdriver by default. So like I said, it's a package manager. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Our team spends every Friday building best practice infrastructure bundles for all three clouds. And what's nice about this is we actually build compliance and security into every single one. And we consider it a bug of ours if one of these packages isn't passing compliance. So with Massdriver, all of these are open source. If you're not using Massdriver, you can still use these infrastructure components They pass the CIS, PCI, and NIST benchmarks of each of the clouds. They pass ISO 27001, and they all pass SOC 2 and HIPAA. So you get a baseline compliance with your infrastructure out of the box without paying somebody $40,000 to tell you did it wrong. Everything here is either open source tools like Helm, Pulumi, I'd say Terraform, but that's not open source anymore. So you can actually extend this platform infinitely by adding these types in here. What I want to go ahead and do, though, is I'm going to hop over to a blank canvas. And what you can see is this is the application that I've published. I've tied an Azure credential here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to set up my blog to run on Azure for the first time. I'm going to drop it onto the canvas. I'm going to say API. And what Massdriver is going to do is it's going to introspect those types, and it's going to figure out a baseline infrastructure for the cloud that you're currently configured with. And sometimes it does really funny things when it lays out the graph. So you can see that it detected that I was on Azure, and it set up a Kubernetes cluster, a Postgres instance, and a virtual network. I could go ahead and start deploying this. But it's also smart enough to realize that this web needs my API. And so what it's going to do is it's going to figure out where to deploy this on this Kubernetes cluster, and also take care of routing between the API and the web server. So this will actually project the API's protocol, port, and host name down into the web application so that it can route its requests properly. So this would allow you to also do the same thing on GCP. I'm going to flip back over to the Azure or the AWS version really quick, since this is already deployed, and we can do some fun stuff here. So I want to go ahead and deploy this blog API. Again, this is using Postgres behind the scenes. We take care of all the provisioning and state management, whether you're using Pulumi, Terraform, Helm, etc. I'm going to hit deploy here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is switch over to a tail I have running of my Kubernetes cluster. And so you can see here is as this is provisioning, what it actually is doing is it's also running my database migrations in sync with this deployment. So what's really cool about this is this all happens within my VPC. This is happening on private ports. I'm not putting a database out there on a public IP address waiting for somebody to come along and tack it. I have a baseline security here where only my application can access this Postgres database. And that is defined by drawing a line, actually having that source of truth in my infrastructure diagram. This all runs in your cloud, Azure, GCP, AWS. So that's the other thing that's really nice about it. You have that data locality, data residency rules that are yours. It's not running in Massdriver's cloud accounts. So there's a lot of other stuff that we do besides just manage that infrastructure. We keep things like inventory of all of the underlying stuff behind whatever a Postgres is. Like we said, we wanted Postgres, and in AWS, it gave us this Postgres instance. So we can see all the resources behind the scenes. We're bringing cost management into the platform in Q3. So you'll actually be able to see how all the costs break down from project to environment to the actual bundle and the underlying resources. Everything in the platform is customizable using JSON schema. So what you'll see here is when I click this configure block, all these fields that are presented here is done with JSON schema and RJSF. So you actually have full control over what this panel looks like. So you can add it and remove as many fields as you want. So you can kind of put guardrails and control what your engineers are able to set on different things like Kubernetes clusters or networks. We also take care of alerting and monitoring out of the box. I didn't do anything. I have alerts automatically set up for my pod readiness, any sort of crash backoffs in Kubernetes. It's automatically configured alarms for my Aurora cluster, my Kubernetes cluster, and my VPC. And we handle the alerting as well, very similar to PagerDuty. We take care of secrets management. So in this web application, I defined that I needed a session secret. So you can set your secrets here as well. And we store that in an air-gapped VPC with in-transit encryption and per row encryption at rest that's rotated. All of the bundles can also ship runbooks. So you have full control over actually defining runbooks with your applications and your infrastructure. So if you have team members that are onboarding and they need to know how to troubleshoot it with different tools, you can put all of that inside of your runbook. We have automated SLOs coming shortly. And the last thing I want to show is this very common thing we feel like you have all the time, like, parity, like it worked in staging, it didn't work in production. One of the things that we have is this visual diffing tool where you can actually grab two different environments. And we keep track of every single deployment that you've made. And you can see I am not a JavaScript connoisseur, so it took me a lot of deployments to get this one running, but every single change is snapshotted in Massdriver, and you can grab those changes from deployment to deployment or from environment to environment and visually compare them and see exactly what's different in my configuration. So if staging was working but production wasn't, maybe it's because I have the max capacity set to 1 CPU in production. Or maybe it's because I've got an older version of Kubernetes, or I don't have enough node groups. But the really cool thing is here is you can quickly spot the differences instead of trying to diff things between Terraform config files. So that was a lot in a very short period of time. So hopefully everybody's hair's blown back. Like I said, we're working on a native integration for Redwood. If you'd like to be in the private beta, send us an email at founders@massdriver.cloud. The platform is always free for under $500 of managed compute per month. But we're also doing 3 months free for all Redwood developers on top of that as well. So if you have larger compute than $500 a month, we'll give you 3 months free of the platform. That's it.
Amy's muted, but you're saying great things.
I am
know you
saying
are.
great things. I was just saying, I appreciate all of this stuff. DevOps is so difficult, and you guys have made it so easy. So, Peter, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought that was really, really amazing. I'm wondering, if I were to pick your platform today, which cloud should I use? Which one works best with Massdriver?
This is the interesting thing, right? Like, so what Massdriver really does is it kind of takes away a lot of the hurdles of the like tertiary services you have to learn, IAM, KMS, et cetera. And one of the things, and this sounds nuts, but especially if you're an early stage company, this really enables like true hybrid cloud, right? And so for earlier stage companies, I suggest using the right tool for the job. Like, we don't do that with the cloud. We use the tool that our cloud offers us, right? Like, why are you using SageMaker? It's like, well, because we use AWS. Not because it's the best tool out there, right? And so with Massdriver, you can kind of break it up. RDS and Aurora is fantastic for transactional workloads. If you want to run OpenAI, that's on Azure, right? And so if you're doing just like straight up transactional workloads, I'd say AWS is a great way to go. They obviously are the market leaders. But what we're seeing with a lot of our customers is actually getting that $100,000 of credits for AWS for their running your transactional Kubernetes and Aurora over there. And then disclaimer, we're a Microsoft partner, but you can get up to, I think, $125,000 of credits through Microsoft's Founders Hub. And then you can run OpenAI over there. So you can actually kind of split and get almost $250,000 of credits. So that's what I'd recommend for early stage companies, especially if they've got transactional and they're trying to do some machine learning stuff with OpenAI.
That's amazing. Wow.
Awesome. David?
So the real answer is wherever your credits are remaining. That's where you.
I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, like the funny thing is, like with serverless, a lot of times, like you do have like a bit of lock-in. Like IAM is the real lock-in of the clouds. Like, let's be honest, right? Like that's the real hard part to figure out. But when your applications are running on Kubernetes, like you saw how easy it was for me to just run that on Azure. Right. And so if I'm using like common tools, Postgres, Redis, Kubernetes for my application, it's pretty straightforward. Right. When you start to get into some of the cloud specific stuff like S3, like you start to have limitations. If I ever really need S3, I got to run on AWS. But you can also bring in other things like MinIO, which gives you an S3 interface to Azure or GCS. Right. So I would say run it wherever you have the credits, but like leaning more towards a containerized solution does give you that portability, so it's easier to move if and when you have to.
Well, I never thought I'd say this. So first time ever recorded on the internet. You made infrastructure look simple and fun. One quick question. Doing serverless, one of the problems I had was I have to write to my database and I'm on serverless, and that means I have to open my database up to the world. 0, 0, 0, 0. So you're saying I don't have to do that anymore if I use Massdriver? Like everything's like locked
Everything's
in?
Yeah. So everything is in that isolated VPC. This is one of the things like
That's it. That's all I need to know. No,
that's all I need to know.
Good. No, that's
okay.
it.
Okay. I won't go. I'll get off the soapbox. I was gonna say something about public IPs and databases.
Over to Ellen.
No, I love this. I feel like you like really approach two canonical problems that I feel like everyone complains about, which is I just want to write my code and not worry about ops, and then how do I deal with all these secrets? I also think the visual diff for what's different between staging and production is something I haven't really seen before that's really important. I wanted to give a shout out to Open Terraform. OpenTF.org is a group of people who've all gotten together now that the project isn't open source anymore, or is changed license, however we want to talk about it. But the thing I wanted to ask, I think the package manager of having these best-in-class infrastructure patterns that people can use is great. Do you have a wish list for ones you're getting from the community? Have you started to see people kind of do things they want to host in Massdriver and put them back into your package manager? Where's the future of that going beyond the team writing them on Fridays?
Yeah, so we do a lot of them, and the way that we do them internally is essentially the engineer that has like the most experience with that service will work through that and work through the cloud publishes reference architectures. So we'll consult those, their best practices guides, what we've seen in high scale environments, and that's how we kind of back them out. So what we see less of in the platform is the things we don't have experience with. So I don't have a ton of machine learning and AI experience. So those are things that we're really looking for the community to start adding to the platform, but we will be working on those as well if customers start asking for them. So that's one of the main drivers that we have today is we have this internal value of like not burdening the customer with operations. And so that's why we have so many features. Every time we run into an operations problem, we build it into the platform. We dog food the platform 100%. So we try not to deal with this stuff either. And so when our customers say that they need a cloud service, like we will go and kind of act like their operations team, that infrastructure for them so that they can just keep focusing on their code. So that's the way we kind of do it today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next up, we have Lee from Vercel. Lee, welcome.
Hey, good to see you.
Likewise.
I'm excited to chat. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Well, I will try to keep things pretty brief and get right into things. I'm Lee. I work at Vercel. I'm the VP of Developer Experience here. And today I want to talk just a little bit about a reintroduction to Vercel for some of you who have maybe heard of us, and for those who are hearing of us for the first time, a little overview about what our platform does, and then how we support Redwood and the future of Redwood as well too. So I think for most developers tuning in, they might have noticed a shift since maybe they started developing, or in the past few years where a lot of developers have really started to double down on front-end technologies. And I'm going to use front-end in quotes here because the lines between front-end and back-end get blurred. But the larger trend of these kind of decoupled services, or picking the best services and putting them together into frameworks, has been an increasing trend over the last, let's say, 10 years. And you can kind of tell when you look at the number of different popular developer surveys on the internet. Granted, they're only one data point, but you could also look at NPM usage as well too. So we've been thinking about this trend for a while. And back in 2016, we built a React framework. And when you look at really the larger market, and let's say the past 10 years as well too, there was a large migration of developers and companies and businesses trying to find the best possible tools to solve specific problems. So I want to understand observability. I'm going to use Datadog. Or I want to have a CRM or a tool for my sales team. I'm going to use Salesforce. And you're trying to put all of these pieces together into one unified platform that you can have a great product experience for your customers, and make it easy for your developers to actually build on your application or website. And the piece that Vercel is specifically interested in is what we're calling the front-end cloud. There's a lot of different clouds out there. There's a back-end cloud like AWS. There's your observability or your monitoring cloud. There's your analytics cloud. There's lots of clouds, right? It's all clouds now. And the part that Vercel is particularly focused on is the experience between your frameworks and how you actually deploy those to global infrastructure and the workflow that you have around those. So concretely, kind of the one sentence here is Vercel is a front-end cloud, and it gives you frameworks, workflows, and infrastructure that help you build personalized experiences. I think that's really one of the key bits that changes between a kind of static web experience or a static website and trying to build a dynamic app on the web. And really on top of that, when you look across this trend, you see there's different levels of abstraction, whether it's just running on bare metal server somewhere, or like servers that are in your own office space for some companies, to moving some of that to the cloud, to maybe using a platform as a service, a la Heroku's of the cloud. And then what we're trying to focus on is specifically that front end piece and help developers building the customer facing, product facing side of their platform to just move really, really fast. We think that's going to help teams iterate really quickly. At AWS reInvent, there was this really awesome slide, primitives, not frameworks. And we kind of think it's interesting because we actually believe the opposite. But this makes sense because this is AWS, this is the backend cloud, right? Love this screenshot of our CTO, Malta here. But we actually think a little bit in frameworks, not primitives. So if you look at this kind of progression over time, I shamelessly stole this slide from Malta, but back in the day, you were SSHing into a machine, or potentially worse. As time went on, we started to get better about this. DevOps grew. We had semi-automated deployments. We had the rise of infrastructure as code. And what we're really focused on right now is what we're calling framework-defined infrastructure. And we think that this is a really powerful tool for developers. So on Vercel today, we support a bunch of different frameworks. And we do that by embracing the native way of writing your framework code, including supporting Redwood. So you write your code in the Redwood way. And what Vercel is going to do is automatically provision infrastructure for you based on that code. Actually, one more bit on this, because I think, David, you were talking about this in the Q&A in the last one. I actually feel like framework-defined infrastructure is an interesting answer to cloud lock-in, because you're writing code in your open source framework native way, and then it's kind of portable to whatever. So you have, whether you want to do that in a self-hosted way or you want to do that in like a managed cloud platform way. I really feel like this is an interesting trend that I think will continue to rise going forward as well too. So on top of having this framework-defined infrastructure platform, we also give developers some other tools to make it really easy to work on their sites. So some tooling to help them iterate faster, whether that's commenting on the specific bits of your UI and saying, oh, we should change this part, or we should edit this part, and making that process easy, integrating into the rest of your kind of Git-based workflow, and just trying to make it secure as well too. And then when you deploy your code out to Vercel, we have a global edge network where you can run some compute, or you can deploy some routing rules or some security configuration. But we try to do this within the bounds of the framework. So concretely, we're trying to tackle a bunch of different pieces along this journey, from the setting up the CI/CD and handling the security and all the compute logic and databases as well too. But I wanted to draw kind of a specific example with Redwood so you can kind of understand how we're thinking about this. So you write your Redwood framework specific code, and Vercel has this tool called our build output API. So the outputs of Vercel go into this format of the build output API, whether it's static files, functions, routing rules, or more. And this is the framework defined bit in that transformation. Then we can take these outputs, which are standardized across basically any framework that we want to support. But of course, we're happy supporting Redwood here. And it gets deployed out to a number of deployments on our edge network. And then you can talk to other services that we offer as well too. So maybe with your Redwood site, for example, you're using a Postgres database with Vercel Postgres. This is kind of the framework-defined infrastructure platform model that we're going with, so that product developers spend more time in their framework code kind of building these great product experiences. The other thing I just wanted to quickly mention as well too is that what we're trying to do is also stay aligned with where the Redwood community is headed with the future of Redwood, whether that's exploring the latest React features with server components, or some of the other bits of the React architecture in a similar fashion to what we've been doing over on the Next.js side. There's a lot of opportunity for us to continue supporting you all in the future vision of Redwood, and making Vercel a great platform to deploy the latest and greatest Redwood sites with global infrastructure to run your server components. And that is the blazing fast version of my talk today.
I love it. I love how easy Vercel makes it. You can just click a button and it recognizes all the things. David, what
all right,
feedback do you have?
All right. So More. You guys are the team behind Next, which, by the way, Redwood API is a wonderful backend for Next. You guys are doing front-end deployment, analytics, deploy to the edge, deploy serverlessly. You've got integrations for serverless database now. I'm not sure AI. You've got AI tooling now.
Yeah.
What more, Lee? What more can you guys do? It's a lot. I've got one question. Just one question. Who's the person I should talk to about getting Redwood in bold on the framework page? That's it. That's my only question. You can hit me on my DMs.
So the ones that are bold, we have longer form framework docs pages. So I would love to work with you all on writing a framework specific docs page. I think we have like 8 right now, but there's a lot more to go. So
there might be a PR. There might be a PR you dropped that I've neglected to get back to. I'm gonna over to Ellen. Great answer.
I do want to say one thing though, David, as a follow up from the last conversation as well too. We were talking a bit about like, how do you handle databases in the serverless world? Does that mean that I have to just open up a public IP and allow traffic from everywhere? And this is also something, it's something I guess we haven't really talked about a ton of, but we have a product called Vercel Secure Compute for our larger teams who can effectively solve this problem and lock down their traffic while still retaining the benefits of serverless.
All right, over to Ellen.
That we just keep moving down this continuum of giving people better abstraction over their infrastructure so they can focus on experiences. I guess one thing I feel like so many great people build on top of Vercel. Are there sites you would point us to that you think we would find inspirational as we're thinking about what to build in Redwood, that you would go, these are like best in class examples of using Vercel?
I feel like one of the great parts about being a platform provider, being a front-end cloud, is that the diversity of the customers is just all over the board. Like I constantly am inspired by a beautiful marketing site or like a really, really fast dashboard or so many just amazing AI companies building on Vercel in the last, 6 to 12 months. I think one that really sticks out to me is a customer that I love to talk about. One, because I buy their products, but two, because they also use Vercel, which is Under Armour. I bought some of their gear before for working out, and it was so interesting for me for them to be kind of like this canonical example of moving from like a monolithic application over to Vercel into our front end cloud, and just immediately seeing their revenue numbers go up. Like that's incredible. Like they moved over to a faster product experience and their customers were able to spend more money on their products. And like at the end of the day, that's really what the front end experience is all about, the product experience.
Love it.
Awesome. Peter?
Yeah, I actually have a question about your preview environments and the introduction of this Postgres, Vercel Postgres. Do you have a timeline or any kind of indication for when we might get preview databases for Vercel preview environments?
Yeah, it's kind of bespoke today. Like it's possible, but it's not really a native integrated part of the workflow. It's definitely something that we want to tackle very soon. I think part of us kind of dipping our toes into having first-party integrations for storage was effectively addressing probably the most common question we would get, which is like, okay, we're solving the front-end cloud piece. How do I integrate with other tools that I really like? We want to continue making this better as well too. Maybe I want to use MongoDB with Vercel, or maybe I want to use a different database, right? We want to continue giving developers that optionality, and then also, building it really deeply into the workflow as well too. So it's definitely top of mind.
Yeah, and I mean, for historical reasons, we have these other services that just don't offer preview environments. But today, you have to. It's like the thing that everyone expects. Yeah, just adding people to that. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lee, for joining us and making the Redwood community what it is.
Thank you.
Awesome. Next up, we have Ankur from Prisma. Welcome.
Hey guys, I'm just gonna get right into it, I guess. All right. And here we go. Today I'm going to pitch on why Prisma is the future of the data layer. Hey guys, I'm Ankur Datta. I'm currently a developer advocate here at Prisma, and I'll get right to it. So what is Prisma? Prisma is your beloved ORM, and it is beyond an ORM. We'll get to the beyond part later on. Before that, we will ask ourselves, why did we build the ORM, right? Spoiler alert, it's all about developer experience. So to understand the motivation behind improving developer experience, we have to look at SQL and why SQL is the best. SQL is great, right? And we're going to, it's been an industry standard since the 70s. People love it. It's efficient. It's portable. It's great. And our friend, John Hackerman over here, is an advocate who only relies on SQL. And he's excellent at it. He's the 10x developer in his team. But there's a slight caveat. Amongst many other things in his toolkit, there's one catch. He has a buzz factor of 1. And Hackerman has left the chat. And with that, you get a wide array of issues, such as unreadable SQL queries, junior devs confused, senior devs confused, everything's chaotic, no one's sleeping at night, and it's just a mess. So that's the drawback of writing raw SQL. At times, it can be counterintuitive, and it works against developer productivity. And that's where Prisma came in. In 2021, Prisma became the complete ORM with 3 favorite toolings, such as Prisma Client, and the Prisma Migrate, as well as the Prisma Studio. Prisma Client added type safety to your TypeScript code bases, and the Prisma Migrate helps you avoid data loss if you ever ran migration scripts by yourself, which you know. And the Prisma Studio allows you to access and interact with your data. So what are the results? People love us. We've grown a lot, and on this red line, you can see that we've grown more. Our curve is steeper than TypeORM and SQLize. They're great tools too, but we're better. And we have become the de facto choice for next generation web tooling, and that of course includes RedwoodJS as well as WAF, Application, Keystone, as well as Sprints. And you can interact with several other databases such as Postgres, MySQL, as well as MongoDB, which is not even SQL. So is data access enough? Another spoiler. No, it's not. With things evolving rapidly, such as like cloud providers such as Cloudflare, Vercel, and Deno, they're launching edge functions, as well as like front-end tooling becoming a part of back-end tooling. Working with and deploying your application layer has become incredibly easy. However, your experience on working with data still remains to be a challenge. And that's when, ta-da, the beyond comes in. Prisma Data Platform. So what's the initiative? What was the inspiration behind the data platform, right? So Facebook and Twitter, behemoths such as this, they have Tau and Strato to ensure uniform data access and help their teams have like a strong confidence in their data infrastructure. However, startups or agencies, they cannot afford such tools, or to maintain or build such products to have a fine experience with their data. And that's where Prisma comes in. And we want to provide a seamless experience for companies of various shapes and sizes, and give them a seamless experience when working with data. And that's when our product comes in. And that's the first product is Accelerate, which provides you with robust connection pooling for where if you have like 10,000 serverless functions popped up suddenly, we can handle it, as well as by providing global caching. I have a live demo ready, which is our speed test. And so this speed test tests out 2 queries, one using the Accelerate cache and one without the Accelerate cache. And it executes a simple Prisma client query which performs a count operation over 500,000 rows. And the API is hosted in a Vercel edge function. So if I run the speed test, let's wait a bit. And by the way, like this is all it takes to add caching to your code base without setting up your infrastructure, of course. And you get a 28x speed up just like that. And you have reduced latency. And you can see that you are being able to execute 4,000 queries per minute versus like 141 queries per minute. And your latency just drops just like that. And going back to the slide, this accelerator is currently in preview, and we'd love it for you to try it out. And then we have Pulse, which is currently in early access, and it allows you to easily react to your database change events. So before, you'd have to rely on strategies such as polling or main tracking state across your application logic, which can get very hairy and messy. However, with Prisma Pulse, we rely on change data capture to just allowing your database to act as a source of truth to make your app real time, basically. So whether you are changing your adding a new field from your application code or just directly editing your database, Pulse will react to it, and you can just simply, through a simple query like this, you can just make your app real time. And these are the products that we currently have, and the data platform will ensure a seamless experience for developers to work with their data. And thank you for this opportunity to talk. With this, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Those speed tests are pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is.
Awesome. Ellen, do you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I always love the side-by-side speed demos. Those are cool. But question-wise, it sounded like you had a migration story you weren't telling us for the sake of brevity. Do you want to share it?
Yes. The migration story, like database migrations?
Yeah, it sounded like you were leaving out a story that you were like, here was the thing that went wrong when I had to write a bunch of these queries.
Oh, I again missed it. But like when you're working with, in my personal career, like I wrote some there was an event where I dropped a database, a production database, like as an intern. So that was fun. That was refreshing. Like, that's how you grow up as a backend developer. And like, after that, you just know that it's a chaotic field to be in and you love it. So
I feel like we've all been there. Very relatable.
Yeah. That's how you grow up, right?
Yeah. They say it's a rite of passage, right? And I've been chatting to a lot of people about accidentally deleting their production data. And one of the things that the story always begins with is I was SSH'd into the production database or something along those lines. And I recall Lee's slide where it was like, we started with SSH, and as we are progressing, that's no longer possible. How do I use Prisma Accelerate? What do I do? To try it out?
You just go to pris.ly/pdp. I'll drop the link in the chat. pris.ly/pdp, and it's public, so you just sign up and you just take a database connection string, you add it in, you get an API key, and we have a fantastic documentation that you can just get Accelerate up and running with. And it works seamlessly with RedwoodJS.
What does PDP stand for?
Prisma Data Platform.
There we go. Perfect.
So, Prisma and Redwood go way back in history. Prisma, what's now Prisma, but Prisma 2 is what became Prisma, Alpha. We were working closely with the team as Peter was bootstrapping the RedwoodJS code. And for those that don't know, the Cambrian explosion that happened with front-end frameworks now having back-end data connected capabilities, like I really think the MVP of that story is Prisma. So you really can't understate how important Prisma has been to like the whole ecosystem. I love what you're doing. So we've had the challenge of your API. We want to co-locate that with the database. Like that's the best possible performance situation. But now as everything is being deployed globally, really like multi-region, those are challenges. So I just really think your caching solution is incredibly elegant, and I encourage people to try Accelerate. So
yeah,
like that's it. That's all I got. Try Accelerate.
Thanks, David.
Ankur, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Love it. Thank you so much for participating in our partner pitch event. And next up, we have Ben from Fixie. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Good. So yeah, my name is Ben Lauer, and I lead developer relations at Fixie. And I appreciate all of you that are still on the webinar for hanging into the end. We've had a lot of great content. I will just say to the Redwood team, thanks for having me. And I'm going to make a plug. Next time we should do this in person. I want to just hang out with all these panelists. There's so much great content and so many questions I have. We use Vercel. And so there's just a ton of great stuff. So thanks for putting this all together. So today I want to talk a little bit about large language models. So this is super high level. I only have a few moments, but the way you train a model is you take known data and you take known results, and then you can train a model with those two inputs. Then when you have this model, you can take novel inputs. So a prompt, if you've used ChatGPT, you type something in, and then that novel input can be converted by the model into something that's relevant and useful. Okay, so the super high level how these things work. So the thing I want to do though is say that here's an example, right? So I actually went out to a large language model and I said, hey, write a wrap in the style of the wrapper logic about RedwoodJS, and make sure to refer to Tom Preston Werner as TP Dub, and then make sure to get a good line or two in there about David Price and the core team. And it was actually really cool. The LLM came back with a whole rap song and a chorus. And, you know, I said, hey, let's get this TP Dub thing in there, and David and the core team, and you can see it weaves that in. And this just shows that this model understands what rap is. It understands who logic is, and it also understands things about RedwoodJS, and then it's able to take these additional instructions and then weave this all together. So this is, in my opinion, this is magical, right? This is really cool. And so you see this, and then a lot of our customers are thinking about building and deploying high quality LLM powered experiences, right? And you see something like that and you're like, wow, it's like, I'm going to be sitting on top of the world. This is a dream. This is amazing. But then let's look at another example. How can I use React Server components in with RedwoodJS? And then I want to just call out two things here. As of my current knowledge, and then this big disclaimer at the bottom, these models are all trained at a point in time. They're limited. They have vast knowledge, but they don't know everything. And so then what happens is the reality sets in of building one of these experiences, and it's like we're at the bottom and we have to scale this mountaintop. So the reality then about deploying these high quality experiences, it's hard. There's a lot of things you have to deal with to build these things. You can get a POC and a hack stood up in a weekend, but to do this at production scale, you have to deal with all of these things: hallucinations, context window limits, and so on and so forth. And at Fixie, we are making this all easier. I want to talk about a couple of things that you can go start doing right now. First is this framework. And I got to talk to Lee after this. He had that big slide, and I know Dave said the same thing, like, hey, how do we get on that list? AI.JSX is an open source framework that allows you to just write React components and JSX. And you can now start building powerful AI, conversational AI applications. And this is available today. It's on our GitHub, and you can go get this. But I also want to talk for a moment about this concept that we're calling Fixie sidekicks. These are embeddable conversational assistants that you can embed right inside your application. So imagine, you know, you go to a website these days and there's all those little chat things that most of the time when I try to use them, it says our support team is only here these hours, or they're very high level what they can do. We're enabling our customers to build these sidekicks that can have full knowledge of everything that the company is doing, and support documentation and so forth. So let me give you a quick demo. And I got to just switch my screen here. And this is a sidekick, and this is one we're building with one of our early partners. And sorry, just got to switch over to this window. There we go. And so this isn't embedded in the website. I've pulled this out into its own thing so we can see it better. But I can start to ask it things about how do I connect my Gmail? So Help Scout allows you to connect your email to the product and have things flow through the system. And this is a live demo. I did pray to the demo gods this morning a couple of times. But you can see here, this is actually giving us an answer. And this is synthesized from the entire Help Scout knowledge base and their product, support, and API documentation. And so I think this is a much easier way to engage. It also then gives us citations. We could click through if we want to go to the detailed docs on these topics, but we get a very useful answer that we can go action on. But I want to show you something else that you can do with a sidekick. So this is again working because we've trained the agent on this additional data source. But let's take a look at another query. Who are the active users in my account? Okay, so now what this is doing is we've actually given the LLM access to tools. These tools are APIs in the Help Scout platform. It's doing a live query, so it recognizes what I'm asking it. It knows what tool to go use, and it goes and does this query to get back real-time data so that it can answer my question here. But the other thing that you're going to see here in a second is we've moved beyond just simple text. We're doing another thing in these sidekicks called generative UI. We're building JSX components and giving those to the model, and it can now display things in a very visual way. So we see photos, we see this nice table, and the model is actually able to reason about which components to use for which query. So we think this is really exciting, this idea that the UI can be generated dynamically at runtime. So let me switch back over to my slides, and I got a couple more things, and then we will get out of here. I know everyone's going a little bit late here. Okay, so we should see the slides back up. So let me just summarize the core features of these sidekicks. They're grounded. So again, we've done this technique called retrieval augmented generation, aka RAG, and we've built this vector database of knowledge, again, based on documents and URLs that we gave it about Help Scout. These can be anything that you want that's relevant to your product or your company. Also, we've made these agents action-oriented through the use of tools and APIs, as I mentioned. We've made a multimodal with generative UI, and these are embeddable. And what context-aware means is when these are embedded in your web application, they can know what's going on in the web page, and we can have two-way communication between the web app and the sidekick. So these are also enhanced by the Fixie cloud. So this is all optional, but you can, when you sign up and use the Fixie cloud, you get all these nice delighters. You can have hosting, observability monitoring, and so forth. So I want to just make an offer here is that we will build alongside you and your development team. If you want to build a sidekick and bring this to your customers, whether it's on the support side, the marketing side, the product side. So definitely feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you. We'll also be at the RedwoodJS conference next month. We're doing a session on conversational AI and also running a workshop on AI JSX. And then finally, we are doing a hackathon in our Seattle offices, September 16th, and would invite anyone. I'm just going to end on this slide. You can scan that QR code if you want to register for the hackathon. We'll have the whole team there. It's going to be a lot of fun building things with LLMs and AI. So thank you very much, and hope to see some of you at the hackathon and at the RedwoodJS conference.
Thanks, Ben. I'm so glad that you mentioned the conference because you said it would be great if we're all together in person, and we will be together in person at the conference. Awesome. Peter, do you have any questions or comments?
I do. Why is the company named Fixie, and who is the fox?
Okay, so the company's called Fixie for a couple of reasons. Matt Welsh, one of the co-founders, is really into bicycles, and so as you may know, a Fixie is a type of bicycle. It's a fixed gear bicycle, if you don't know. And then the other reason, my understanding is the URL was available. So I think that's always the kind of consideration that you have to do these days when naming a company. And then the fox. We wanted a mascot for the company, something that was kind of fun and that people could relate to. The fox's name is actually Foxy, and we actually are doing some more work to create some more versions of her, so we can have some fun. I think we'll have some fun swag at the hackathon with Foxy.
Perfect.
So Ben, yes. I want all those things you mentioned. So let's do that. Done. So question for you though. You're saying if someone were to come to the RedwoodJS conference and go to one of the workshops, they could learn how to use all these things. And if they DM David Price, he'd probably make him a great deal on the workshop price. All that's true?
Knowing the kind of generous individual that you are, I would assume that you make him a great deal on the workshop. But yes, we will. I mean, it's a 2-hour workshop, so I can't guarantee that people will leave with like the full Sidekick built, but we'll definitely get into everything that you would need to do and send everyone home, hopefully feeling like that gentleman sitting on top of the world, with the nice sunset above the clouds and all the possibilities ahead.
We're really excited.
The Foxy swag
and the Foxy swag.
Oh yeah, we will definitely bring Foxy swag.
I love the dynamically generated UI elements in the chat. Kind of, did you train on something else to pull those? Did you build a stock set? How are you thinking about adding to them? Can you just tell us a little more about them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the shorter answer is it's like early innings and we're just kind of figuring it out. The way that works right now is we've done a lot of really good prompt engineering to essentially tell the model, hey, you have these MDX components available to you, and you should use them when they make sense. And then I would say like right now we've built a handful of these components. We think in the future we probably need to get to something like Bootstrap or Tailwind UI, where there's like a set of sort of canonical components. But I think that's going to avail itself as we kind of continue to work with customers and figure out like what is the right mix. But you can definitely, through the prompt in your own application, you can say, hey, if the user asks this type of query or you're giving back this kind of information, use this component. And we've figured out how to get the model to generally respect that. So yeah, it's very early in a work in progress, but this idea that you can no longer have to think about every single permutation of your UI and build that as an engineering team. And instead you can kind of just give these Legos, these building blocks to the model and let it happen at runtime, we think is really exciting and is going to change the way that software gets built.
Awesome. Love it. Last up, I'm going to pull up all of our pictures. There we go. And David, do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, I always have things to say. Do we have everybody? I think Lee might have had to go. Okay, this will probably not come as a surprise, but yeah, you were all my favorites. And here's why. So Redwood is now critical infrastructure for like startups that we know of that have raised $70 million. And you would think that would make me not be able to sleep at night, but I can sleep at night for 2 reasons. Reason one, we have an amazing community and core team, and like the collaboration is just off the charts. But reason 2 is because like we are built on best in class libraries, and we collaborate and use tools and have integration partners like you all, and it just makes Redwood better. And so this is my dream here is like the community gets to know more about all the things that you all are doing. So that is all. You're all my favorite. Over to Ellen.
This was awesome. I think one of my things that I noticed as we were going through it that's unusual is it's so easy to do a bunch of pitches to engineers where we only talk about a cool architecture thing. And we did some of that. So I feel like every single person had, here's a cool piece of technology. Here's a really novel thing I did for my developer experience. Here's even a thought about the end user experience the developers are building for. And a lot of them even had, here's something about why that matters to the business. And I feel like we did a lot of great talking about how these tools benefit us as Redwood developers, but also kind of the companies we work at and the products that we're building and our end users.
Awesome. Peter?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of like jump on Ellen's bandwagon there. And I'm a founder. I was taking notes of what everyone here was saying because I have to do the exact same thing. And I learned a whole bunch. You all did really great, and I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us and making the Redwood community what it is. I am going to highlight just one more time the RedwoodJS conference, September 26th through 29th in Grants Pass, Oregon. So you can go to redwoodjsconf.com. And a lot of these partners that have helped us will be present at the conference. And so we encourage you to come. It's going to be a fantastic event. You can see all the speakers and the workshops at the conference. So we hope that you will join us. So again, thank you to everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Oh, great job. Really good.
Thank you.